Hi, it's Karen, the Weekend Craftaholic, and today I want to walk you through how to make a little bowl cozy. So if you've not seen these before, basically you put your bowl inside and it keeps it nice and cozy for you. So if you've got a hot bowl of soup or noodles or stew, casserole, whatever, you can actually then keep it in here. Keeps your hands from getting burned with a hot bowl, and great for kids to use as well. It's also a really great pattern for a beginner. So if you're looking for a project that's easy to do for a beginner, this is a great one to try. You can see it's going to be a great one to practice doing your darts. It's very forgiving because, as you can see, you can make some imperfections. You don't have to be as precise as you normally would when you're sewing with dressmaking, and it can be done in under probably 30 minutes, I would say. I have actually put a link down below if you want a copy of this pattern. You don't need a copy of the pattern. There's lots of them on Pinterest as well as YouTube, so definitely check them out if you wanted to follow a different pattern to mine. But I do have the pattern and the instructions available on my Etsy store, and I love PDF patterns because you can use them over and over again and they don't take up loads of storage in your space. I do have a walkthrough step-by-step instructions on here, but what we're going to do today is talk you through using this. So first of all, let's get started with the supplies you're going to need. This project is great, a great Scrapbuster for using up your scraps. It's also great if you've got fat quarters. So you can see I've got a little bundle here, and I would always recommend that you wash and iron your fabric before you start any project. The size of the pattern is roughly 5 by 5 inch, so that's why I think these particular fat quarters are great little shapes for them. But as I said, if you've got anything in your stash, I would definitely encourage you to use your stash first. I would also recommend cotton for the outer fabric. So you can see here I've used fat quarters cotton here, and to give that insulation we're also going to use some wadding. Now if you're a beginner sewer, you may not have wadding in your stash, but that's okay. You can also use some toweling fabric. Everyone's got towels around the place, especially old ones that you might not want to use anymore, so always consider doing that. And for the first time making this project, I would also recommend definitely using your scraps. Test out making a bowl cozy and see how you go before you use your nice fabric. So you should always do that in sewing, just in case things do go wrong. Alright, so that's the supplies you're going to need, as well as the other basics like your sewing machine, your thread, and that can be coordinating or contrasting thread. It really is up to you. And similarly, whether you prefer to use scissors or a rotary cutter and a cutting mat. So I'm going to show you both of those methods now. Okay, so I'm here at my little cutting station, and I've got a cutting mat here which I use with my rotary cutter. If you've not got one, don't worry, absolutely use scissors. And if you're a beginner sewer, I would obviously encourage you to keep your fabric scissors separate to your paper scissors, so I just mark mine so I can easily identify them. But let's start with this pattern. So you can see here I'm just going to cut on the blue lines, and as I've said, it doesn't matter whether you're too precise or not. This pattern is very forgiving in that respect. So I've made these blue lines quite nice and thick for you to be able to sew down. We've got our pattern. Let's start with the outer fabric. So we need two pieces, one for the top of the bowl cozy and one for the bottom. And they can be the same material. I'm just using two different fabrics here that coordinate. So we're going to cut out this fabric 4 times, 2 with our outer pieces and then 2 with our inner pieces. Preference is wadding, or you can just use an old towel fabric as well. So you'll see the pattern is indicated where the fold line is, so make sure you fold your fabric before you start. And if your pattern has a direction on it as well, you just want to be mindful that that's nice and straight. But this bowl cozy is kind of reversible. There is no top and bottom. You can turn it any way you want. Also at this point you might want to use pattern markers to hold down your pattern. So I'm just using these plumbing washers to do that. And then you can either use your scissors or you can use your rotary cutter. I prefer to use a rotary cutter because it's a lot quicker. And always remember to put it in the direction away from you, not towards you, because these things are super sharp, as you can see here. It should always be away from you, so always turn your material to get it in the right angle that you need. and we can trim off our excess. So if you're using your scissors, to make sure you get right into the centre of that, or if you're using your rotary trimmer, it's a little bit easier to get to that sharp point in the middle. Okay, and that is the shape you should be left with. So I'm just going to put you on fast forward now again and just show you the cutting, the remaining outside piece that I need to do. Okay, so you should now have two outer pieces, which is your cotton pieces, and two pieces of wadding or toweling, which are both of your inner pieces. The next step here is to get one of each. So we'll get an outer and an inner. I'm going to turn that so it's the wrong side up, and then we're just going to match these up as best we can. Now, in terms of getting this spot on, this is why I'm saying it's a very forgiving pattern. I want you to be able to see you don't have to get it completely spot on. We can trim some of these excess pieces off. This is really the desired effect you want. You want to be able to see your outer fabric, because what we're going to do now is sew a big cross along the middle just to make sure that both pieces are secure. And you can either do a straight stitch. I've got a long straight stitch here, or you could use a decorative stitch. I've just used a zigzag stitch on this one. So we're going to do that with both pieces. We're just going to take it to our sewing machine, sew a line down the middle, down the middle. You can see here some of my wadding goes over. Wadding is very stretchy, you could kind of stretch it in place, but what I would say is go ahead with the stitching and then we'll tidy some of this up later. And if you feel more comfortable, you can pin this in place or use some quilting clips, but we are just doing a straight stitch to make this secure in place. So at this point I normally wouldn't do that, but it is personal preference. I also use a longer stitch as well rather than a smaller one. So I'm just going in with my point right down the centre, and there's no right and wrong with this. You can sew this as close or as far away from the edges of the cross as you want to. There's no need to do a back stitch at the start and finish of the cross in the middle, because this isn't actually attaching anything in place other than these two pieces which we're about to sew up. Always make sure when you finish your needle is at the top, that clicks in place before you lift up your sewing foot and pull the fabric, and that stops your thread from nesting on your next stitch. Okay, so that's one of them done. I'm going to quickly do the other side. I've got them in place, I'm putting them loosely where they need to be, and I'm just doing the sewing down each side. Okay, so now we've got our two pieces together. I'll talk you through the next step, but before we start that, what I want to show you is just check if your wadding is on the inside of the fabric pieces. This one is fine. This one you can see goes over slightly. So I'm just going to trim a piece of that away, as you can see, and that's fine. You don't want to trim too far away, because that means you're going to have to sew your seam allowance a bit further in. So I'll check the first one, we'll do a quick check of the second one. And having the wadding on the inside further in from the fabric helps to reduce that volume when we sew the dart together as well. Okay, so we'll start with the first one, and what we're going to do is create darts in these, and that's going to give our bowl the shape. So we're going to turn it right side out, and then we're going to fold over, and then we're going to do a nice small stitch along here. This time we are going to back stitch at the start and finish, just to make sure that's a nice tight hold, and then once that's sewn we'll get that nice shape. So we're going to do that 4 times on each of these inside little darts on both of these fabric pieces. So right side showing, fold it over close as you can, matching the outer fabric, not the inner wadding, and then take that to machine and sew a nice small stitch. Now, I'm not going to show you all of these, but I just want to show you the effect of the first one once you've done that. And again, don't worry too much about this because we'll deal with that in the next stage. So now we've sewn our darts together, as you can see, our bowl is starting to take shape. So now what we need to do is attach these 2 pieces together. So we're going to start first of all with the bottom part. So we want to make sure the bottom piece has the wrong side facing down, which is the wadding, and the top piece has the wadding facing up. And so you've got your right sides together. So what will be the outside are both on the inside. So I know that sounds a little bit complicated, and I always forget it every time, which is why I like to have a pattern handy. But fit them inside each other so your wadding is on the outside. Because what we're going to do next, the next step is to kind of match up these seams. We're going to sew all around the edge, but we're just going to leave one edge left so we can turn it inside out, and then the final step will be to sew that opening up. So match up your seams as closely as you can. And when you're sewing seams, you should always have one facing one way and the other facing the opposite, just to avoid that bulk when it's going underneath in the sewing machine and with the needle. You can see we've got them all matched. Again, you can use pins or clips if you prefer, but I find this is quite a sturdy piece with the wadding, so I don't normally worry too much about clipping it in place. So match up those, and we're going to sew all the way around with a nice small stitch, remembering to backstitch at the start and again at the end here. Now you might want to put a little pin so you don't forget and sew all the way around. So this is I'm going to start here, so this is going to be my end point, so I am going to put a pin here. Okay, so you can see I've just put a little marker here to remind me to stop at this point. And before I start on the machine, I'm just going to make sure that my edges of my fabric are all touching, and that even applies to the wadding, because as I said, it is quite stretched. So I'm just going to make sure that all of them are touching, and then that way as we're sewing we don't miss any and then have a gap in our fabric. I'm going to start just after that seam, and I'm just going to use 1/4 inch for my seam allowance. When you get to the corner, make sure you leave your needle in the fabric before you lift up your foot and turn it around. And don't worry about this excess, because we can easily trim that off. Don't worry about all the sides not being equal, honestly it won't be noticeable. Okay, we've been all the way around apart from this last little bit, but before we turn it inside out, we're going to cut away some of the excess fabric just to lose some of the bulk here. And again, you can use your scissors or your rotary cutter depending on your preference. And be careful you don't get too close to this stitch line. I like to keep 1/4 of an inch away from it. And I'm even going to tidy up the piece here that we haven't sewn yet, just to make sure it matches this side. A moment of truth, let's turn this inside out. Okay, so we should have 3 of those little corners. And then if we fold that all into it itself, you can see that can either be my outer fabric now, or it can be my inner fabric, and that is our bowl cozy done. So the last thing to do is to close open this seam, and the easiest way is just to fold the fabric in on itself. You could press this with an iron if you wanted to, and again using pins if you prefer, and then stitch all the way across. So we'll put a little up here just while I get my machine closer. Now if you do like that effect, you could stitch all the way around so it's got a uniform edge. I'm happy with the way it is. This is just for me and my family, and you can see what I'm talking about, how forgiving this is. It doesn't have to be precise. Let's get the bowl and try it. There we go, and it fits our bowl nice and neat. And it's easy to handle, great for children as well if they've got something hot. So I hope you found that tutorial useful. I hope you'll check out my Etsy store if you did want a copy of the pattern. So thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope to see you again soon. If you'd like to see more sewing projects, please check out my sewing playlist, and you'll see some more easy beginner projects there as well.